Welcome back to the second part of Brief History of Gymnastics in Sweden, Denmark and Germany. Let's begin with the recreation movement in Germany. Towards the end of the century, many factors contributed to a change of attitudes towards an organized recreation and sports participation and stimulated their promotion. Herbert Spencer, widely read in the continental Europe, he not only influenced nations to revise secondary schools' educational programs, placing more emphasis upon mathematics and science, but also made it quite clear that gymnastics could not be compared with sports participation, competitive or recreation in the development of desired social characteristics. In 1878, William Max Wundt, a physiologist and experimental psychologist, aroused considerable interest in play and recreation as expressions of animal and human behavior. All the influence of Wundt's work, Karl Groos, a professor of biology of the University of Basel in Switzerland, produced his exhaustive studies, The Play of Animals, in 1896 and The Play of Man in 1899. In the closing years of the 19th century, interest in play and games contributed to the child study movement in America and the play movement in Europe as counteragents to the harmful physical effects of the modern sedentary life. Early contributors. Through Konrad Koch, a teacher of history and classical languages, and August Hermann, a gymnastic instructor at the gymnasium in the secondary school in Brunswick, German boys were introduced to the English games of rugby and cricket and the American game of baseball between the years 1874 to 1876. By 1878, these games became so popular that they were made a regular part of the school's physical education program 2 afternoons a week. Koch and Hermann were appointed supervisors of the play periods, and a very modest budget was provided to purchase playing equipments. By 1879, the school authorities made participation in these and other games a requirement for the lower and middle grades, and by 1882, it became necessary for the upper grades as well. At the convention of the German Gymnastic Teachers Association at Brunswick in 1876, Hermann said that the German people must, like the English, make gymnastics and participation in games a national habit if they were to combat the adversing effects of the modern life. Other speakers who had visited England pointed out that enthusiasm for games was not restricted to the schoolboy but was to be found among Englishmen in every walk of life. The English found in this participation a certain values which the Germans might well consider. Emil Hartwig. In 1881, Emil Hartwig, a Russian judge and an expert gymnast in his student days at the universities of Heidelberg and Berlin, led a movement to promote games and outdoor sports in Germany. Under his influence, the Central Association of the Bodily Education in the Nation and School was organized in 1882. Its aim was the promotion of bodily exercises through gymnastics, skating, swimming, bathing, rowing, games and other festivals. This organization was one of the first to appoint a medical section to observe the physical effects of games on an individual, which has since been standard practice in European countries. Local branches of the Central Association were quickly formed in the larger German cities. By 1882, playgrounds were established and equipped in Düsseldorf, Bonn, Witten and Berlin, and by 1884 in Bremen and Chemnitz. Other German municipalities provided leadership for the public participation in games and other recreational activities. Hartwig was pleased with the general response, but was disappointed in the small membership in the subsidiary association and the financial support given by the playground movement. Hartwig's greatest stumbling block was the German association, whose leaders assumed an indifferent attitude. At the height of his career in 1886, Hartwig was shot and killed in a duel, and the playground movement in Germany had for the time being lost its momentum and one of the history's pioneer recreational leader. Other playground leaders. Hartwig had convinced Gustav von Goseler, Russian Minister of Education and Public Worship, of the worthiness of his cause. In his student days, the Russian minister had been an expert all-round athlete. At the 9th National Convention of the German Gymnastic Association in Berlin in 1881, he told gymnastic leaders that games and outdoor activities should share the program with formal gymnastics. In 1882, von Goseler passed an edict which required the provision of outdoor playgrounds for gymnastics and active games. Emil von Schenkendorf, a proponent of the manual arts idea, which paralleled the playground movement in Germany in the 1880s, got in touch with Hartwig in 1882 to request some form of activity to counteract the effect of school routine on his boys at the Garlitz Manual Training School. At Hartwig's suggestion and with the able assistance of G. Ernest, a gymnastic instructor in the secondary school, von Schenkendorf succeeded in introducing games program not only into his school but also into the elementary and secondary schools of Garlitz. At the National Convention of Language Teachers at Görlitz in 1889, Ettner provided a program of games as a feature of the meeting. The visitors received the exhibition with enthusiasm, and several teachers suggested that since few were similar with games instructions, a normal course should be established to teach them. Von Schenkendorf accepted the suggestion and with the support of von Goseler organized such a normal course in 1890 with Ettner as its head. In the first playground course, Ettner lectured on the theory of play and games, discussed the mechanism of some 60 games and provided demonstrations and actual practice in 34. Ettner published a games manual in the year 1890. With the continued favorable acceptance of the playground movement, von Schenkendorf invited a group of influential public figures to meet in Berlin in 1891 to consider a large-scale national promotional scheme. This meeting resulted in the formation of the Central Committee for the Promotion of Games, designed to assist individuals or local organizations in the introduction of games and other recreational activities to the public. The Central Committee not only accelerated the playground movement in Germany, but also laid the foundation for the establishment of sports clubs in every village, every city in Germany, and later practically in every foreign country on the continent. Coming on next to teacher preparations in Germany. As gymnastics and emphasis-free exercises were introduced into the schools of German Confederation, the problem of teacher preparation became acute. To meet the demand for qualified gymnastic instructors in the elementary and higher schools, the Russian government founded the Royal Central Gymnastic Institute in Berlin under the joint control of the Ministers of War and Education. Captain H. Rothstein of the Russian Army was appointed as the director. General Ernest van Fuel, during 1779 to 1866, as the Chief of Staff, had organized the first military swimming school at Berlin Institute sometime after 1815. Swimming pools were rare, even in teacher training institutions financed by the government, but prospective teachers attending the Royal Central Gymnastic Institute received training of swimming. General Fuel introduced the fishing pole technique, in which the learner was suspended in the water by the means of staff and rope attached to the wide bill encircled his midriff. This method of instruction was used in military and naval schools of other countries and to some extent in the school systems. A conflict of gymnastic philosophies. As a government official, Captain Rothstein had become familiar with the Swedish system of gymnastics, and when he organized the institute at Berlin, he was inclined to favor this scientific system as opposed to the John Esselin system of German gymnastics. When Captain Rothstein banished the horizontal and parallel bars from the program of the institute, he provoked violent reactions, which participated in a debate on the respective merits of the two systems. In 1862, a commission of the medical men of such caliber as Rudolf Virchow and Emile du Bois Raymond was appointed to study the problem and make a recommendation. The commission recommended that the two pieces of apparatus in question should be retained, and Captain Rothstein resigned. In the same year, Russia made German gymnastics obligatory in elementary schools, and the future of the John Esselin system was assured. Gymnastic leaders in Sweden. A.O. Lindfors during 1781 to 1841. Lindfors graduated from the University of Lund in 1802 and returned the following years to get his Ph.D. He wrote his dissertation on the subject of gymnastics, the first of its kind presented as partial fulfillment of the doctorate degree in any university. In this study, Lindfors made a distinction between Gymnastica naturalis and Gymnastica artificiosa. In his opinion, artificially devised exercises had educational value and were an improvement over spontaneous natural activities. Lindfors placed artificial exercise in three categories. First one is military gymnastics, then athletic gymnastics, and medical gymnastics for the prevention and correction of physical defects. In his treatment for the second category, Linford recommended that a Greek pentathlon of running, jumping, javelin and discus throwing and even wrestling and platos prakasas, which consisted of games, acrobatics and dancing. He cited that educational value of games directed by a well-prepared teacher and antedated Freud's appreciation of the importance of play and games in the development of self-expression and personality in children. Linford was appointed lecturer in education at the University of London, where controlled the qualifications of tutor, who he insisted should be as well prepared to teach gymnastics as there were other subjects. He eventually gave up his active interest in gymnastics. P. Henrik Ling, since 1776 to 1839. Ling's father was a clergyman and his mother a close relative to the famous Swedish author Olof Rodek. Ling and Linford grew up in the same parsonage in southern Sweden, attended the same classical school and the University of Lund. Ling crystallized his thinking on Swedish gymnastics in his book, General Principles of Gymnastics. Between 1794 and 1799, Ling served as a tutor and a city clerk in Stockholm. At an early date, he showed literary talent of great promise. In 1799, he left Sweden for Denmark, where he met a man who stimulated his literary for Denmark, which later earned him the title of Poet Laureate of Sweden. Ling also developed an interest in gymnastics and became a master performer in the art of fencing. In 1804, Ling returned to Sweden and secured an assignment as substitute teacher for an aging fencing master at University of Lund. After the latter's death, Ling was given a full-time appointment as instructor for game of gymnastic, fencing, horseback riding. He studied anatomy and physiology and applied his knowledge, rudimentary as it was in his time, to gymnastics. Ling's contribution to Swedish gymnastics. Ling not only accepted Linford's 3 categories of gymnastics, but made practical contributions to all the 3 areas. As a consequence of the Napoleon Wars, Sweden realized that importance of conditioning men for military services and asked Ling to prepare men to give army personnel physical training. At the Royal Centre Institute of Gymnastics, established in 1814, Director Ling provided a course of gymnastics and fencing and published army manuals on gymnastics and bayonet fighting. He also experimented with physical rehabilitation in a special room where he accepted persons of all ages and all degrees of physical handicaps. Ling's aim was to develop the body by maintaining a balance between antagonist pairs of muscles and by teaching the pupils to subjugate his will to the command of the teacher. He believed that body movements should not be determined by apparatus, as in the German style, but that the apparatus should be designed so as to secure the desired result, whether they were military, educational or rehabilitation. Ling originated the stall bars, that was ripstall, Swedish boom, that was called bomb, saddle, that was saddle bomb, Windham ladder, that was teak. Low combination of benches, that were bank and lutpla. And a welting box, that was plinth. To these he later added the heppers, that was hest, and the horizontal, vertical and oblique climbing ropes. These pieces of apparatus were efficiently arranged in the gymnasium or exercise hall, and class members exercised upon them accordingly to their individual needs and at the command of the teacher. Ling's successors. Upon his death in 1839, King was succeeded by Lars Gabriel Branting as director of the institute. Branting continued Ling's policies and spent considerable time in the promotion and development of medical gymnastics. During Branting's administration, the scientific Swedish method of gymnastics attracted the attention of military and educational authorities in other lands. The Russian government sent Lieutenants Rothstein and Tekcho to the institute in 1845 and 46. Branting was succeeded by Gustav Nibelius, a former army officer and a keen student of the Spisa's free exercises. Under Nibelius, the course of the institute was extended from 1 to 2 years, and a separate course for women teachers was established. Nibelius gave each of the 3 areas in gymnastics the status of the separate department. He appointed Hjalmar Ling, Ling's eldest son, head of the educational gymnastic department. Truls John Hartelius, the head of the medical gymnastic department, and he himself headed the military gymnastic department. Hjalmar Ling, who succeeded Nibelius, completed Spisa's work by assigning each exercise to its proper category according to the way it affected parts of the body and the organism as a whole. He then arranged the exercises in an orderly progression from the least demanding. This approach to the free exercises of Spisa's became known the world as the day's order. In 1886, Ling was followed by L. Motry Stongren, under whose administration medical gymnastics were given as a 3-year course, and the length of the course in all areas was increased. Gymnastics in Denmark. Franz Nachtigall, during 1777 to 1847. The son of C. Taylor, Franz Nachtigall received his early education in a private school. He enrolled in the University of Copenhagen to study theology, but he discontinued his education upon the death of his father. Taking employment as a tutor, he sought relief from his long teaching hours in gymnastics and fencing. He enjoyed fencing so much that he gave private lessons in his free time. Convinced that he had found his true vocation, in 1709, he opened a private outdoor gymnasium which attracted 150 university students and townspeople. Early in the Napoleon Wars, Denmark was forced by her geographical location to ally herself with the French Emperor. She faced all Napoleon aggressors, and the drain on her manpower and material resources was disastrous. Military versus educational objectives. In the ensuing years, the institute was hard pressed to meet the demand for personnel qualified to condition soldiers for military service. Before the close of the Napoleon Wars, the government sought to meet the military needs by extending gymnastics to the schools. In 1809, an ordinance was passed requiring the teaching gymnastics to potential soldiers in the secondary schools. And in 1814, a similar ordinance was passed affecting elementary schools. Historians hail these ordinances as landmarks in the history of physical education, but they lose much of their glory. The school teaching personnel was drawn from non-commissioned officers who had been trained at the Institute of Military Gymnastics, and their warlike objective was clear. The dominant position of the military in the preparation of the teachers of gymnastics in the schools lasted until the turn of the century. The playground movement. As in other countries, the emphasis on games became more pronounced in Denmark when the authorities realized that English games helped develop desirable social traits not only encouraged by individual gymnastics. The Copenhagen Playground Association was founded in 1891, and a promotional organization similar to the German Central Committee was organized in 1897. In 1896, the Copenhagen Playground Association proposed to William Pardon Flith, Minister of Education, that the government provide granting aid to assist local school authorities establish and equip the playgrounds. The proposal was approved and appropriations made for a 3-year period. As a sequel, a committee for promoting group games among students was appointed, part of whose responsibility was the administration of state's funds for recreation. Teachers' preparation. Denmark was one of the first nations to establish an institute to train military personnel to serve as gymnastic instructors in the armed services. Nightingale's teaching procedures probably served as a guide for both military schools and teacher institutes established in other countries after 1804. Towards the close of the 19th century, Denmark, like other European countries, became interested in the Swedish system for schools. Gutsmuth's Nightingale gymnastics were gradually replaced under the trained in the Swedish system or imported from Sweden. In 1898, the Danish government established a 1-year course for the training of gymnastic teachers. This course was organized by K.A. Knudsen, who was well versed in the Swedish system. With this, we come to an end to today's lecture. I hope this must have enhanced your knowledge about this very important concept. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.